of it, man!
Alright, it's the gut-punching, back-breaking, never shaking, HAWK, all night, all day, except when I make your girl spray. Today's video is what happened immediately after the 2001 Invasion angle ended. This is a storyline which gets a lot of people angry because so many balls were dropped in the process. Fans wanted a proper WWF vs WCW storyline with dream matches between all the top stars. But we never got that, and instead we got a bunch of WCW jobbers and Booker T and DDP. Plus a bunch of random ECW guys in the mix, and other than Rob Van Dam, they'd all be pointless, in terms of their place in the Federation at least. Me personally, I still enjoyed the Invasion storyline. There was so much going on in the show, and you were introduced to a bunch of new characters and wrestlers that you may not have been familiar with if you only watched the WWF. The video packages really did a great job making this storyline seem like a big deal, probably their best work, and the commentary team did an amazing job selling us on the fact that one company was about to go out of business. I just loved Heyman and Jim Ross together. So of course, the Alliance storyline came to a head at Survivor Series 2001. Team WWF were victorious in the main event and the Alliance were put out of business. That's one major storyline closing off, but there were still lots of smaller storylines yet to be resolved at Survivor Series. So I'm going to take you through them and see what happened. On the Raw after Survivor Series, Vince arrives on a private jet. He's definitely flaunting his victory here. It had been weird because we were sort of rooting for Vince during the Invasion storyline because he was the WWF owner. I guess he's back to being a clear-cut cocky heel. He fires Foley as the WWF commissioner, but Foley's glad to go, so it's not a big deal. The most notable thing you're probably all wondering is what happened to all the WCW jobbers who are seemingly now out of work. What would happen to them? Well, Vince McMahon invented the Kiss My Ass Club. One Alliance member would be able to kiss McMahon's ass. In return, they'd get a job. Any Alliance members who are current champions have safe jobs. This would be the Dudley Boys as the tag champions, Christian the European champion, Test with immunity from winning the Immunity Battle Royal, and Rob Van Dam the hardcore champion. Vince immediately makes them face each other in matches to stop their previous friendships. Doesn't really work. Christian tries to kiss his ass and apologise. He was one of several WWF wrestlers who defected to the Alliance. It seems like at first Vince is going to give Christian a hard time, but it won't turn out that way. For the next few weeks, Christian kisses his ass, but in a couple of months he'd be doing the un-American gimmick. But casting the champions to one side, that's still a lot of guys with no jobs. Paul Heyman is invited to the ring, who was obviously one of the heads of the Alliance and the commentator alongside JR. This has literally just been done so Vince can tell him that he's fired. Heyman tries to attack JR, which doesn't work either, and Ross throws some punches at him. Jerry the King Lawler is welcomed back to the WWF to a massive crowd ovation. In reality, Heyman took up a backstage role as a writer for the WWF and he was credited with the success of the Ruthless Aggression era. Another man who was in the firing line after Survivor Series was Chris Jericho. He'd been on Team WWF, but towards the end of the match he turned heel, attacked The Rock and almost cost Team WWF the victory. Jericho and The Rock had been on the same team, but also they hated each other and they'd been feuding. This feud actually continues after Survivor Series. It seems like Jericho's in for some punishment from Vince for his actions, but that wouldn't really last long either, because within a month Jericho would be the first undisputed champion. Kurt Angle is being hailed as the man who single-handedly saved the WWF. He was a heel at Survivor Series, but on that show he turned his back on the Alliance, took out Austin and helped The Rock get the win. It's revealed that for the entire month when he was with the Alliance, he was secretly a mole sent by McMahon to disrupt the opposition. This doesn't make Angle turn into a good guy though, because he's full of himself. He keeps bragging and expecting gratitude from The Rock and the fans, but he ain't getting none. Edge correctly points out that Angle was just doing it for himself, because if the Alliance had won, they'd be none the wiser. But when they lost, he became a WWF hero. He was playing both sides. Vince is the only man who appreciates Kurt Angle. As a reward for his actions, Vince tries to gift him the WWF title, even though Stone Cold is the champion. This is all stopped by a debuting Nature Boy Ric Flair. Just one night after the Invasion storyline ended. How frustrating. Bit of a logic hole here too. If Vince had the power to strip title belts, why can't he just strip the former Alliance members and fire them all? Which leads me to this point. X-Pac and Billy Kidman were supposed to have a Cruiserweight Light Heavyweight title unification match at Survivor Series, but X-Pac was so hurt that it didn't happen. Whilst X-Pac was off TV injured, his belt was stripped and deactivated. So they obviously could strip belts. Plot hole right here. Vince's next target was his children Shane and Stephanie, who had been the ones to buy WCW and ECW. But now they've lost all their money and power, with the Alliance losing at Survivor Series. Shane seems to accept his defeat gracefully, and he leaves. He's not seen again in the WWF regularly until March 2003. Stephanie, on the other hand, blames everything on Shane, including telling Vince McMahon that she wanted him to die. Vince has her escorted from the arena. She essentially pulls a Dixie Carter and Hulk Hogan as she desperately clings to his leg. Steph is banished from the WWF forever, but she'll be back just a couple of months later when her husband Triple H returned. The WCW Heavyweight title belongs to The Rock at this point, and it's just casually renamed to the World title. It wouldn't be long for this world and would soon be unified with the WWF title. William Regal is selected as the man to join Vince McMahon's Kiss My Ass Club. Regal had been on Team WWF, but he'd switched to the Alliance halfway through as their commissioner. He kisses the ass of Vince Don't Look at My Ass McMahon to keep his job. How humiliating. I know it's acting, but the Hawk could never do this. Regal keeps his job, but just as a wrestler and not a management figure anymore. The embarrassment he suffered brings out a new aggressive side to his character, and he'd be the Intercontinental Champion within a month, so it wasn't all bad. By Survivor Series, Taz was neither a WWF or Alliance guy, and Jim Ross revealed Taz had his contract retained to be an announcer on SmackDown. Taz later reveals on SmackDown that Vince McMahon was impressed by Taz's hatred of Paul Heyman. Somehow, Shane and Stephanie sold their shares in the Alliance company to Ric Flair, which somehow makes Ric Flair the co-owner of the WWF, even though Shane and Stephanie didn't own half of the WWF, so I'm confused. So Flair versus Vince would be a feud we'd be getting for a while as they fought for power in the company. Their feuding leads to a creation of a tournament for the undisputed title. It would also of course lead to the NWO in the WWE just a few months later. Stone Cold Steve Austin returns and attacks Kurt Angle. How weird, because literally one night earlier everyone was against Austin. The easiest face turn of all time. Think about the logic here. Austin, the Alliance man, is screwed by Kurt Angle, a secret WWF guy, to save the WWF. And Austin is angry about the Alliance losing and being screwed by Angle. But we're somehow supposed to be cheering Austin? He's just so popular, logic doesn't matter. Austin would remain the WWF champion for just a month, but in the meantime he has to contend with his former Alliance champion members beating the Hawk out of him as instructed by Vince. They were now all doing Vince McMahon's bidding. Vince told them that they may have been in the Alliance, but he now saw them as family. It's funny how so much changes in just a week. Test was the man that gained immunity from being fired by winning the Battle Royal at Survivor Series. But he was never supposed to be in that match in the first place, and he only gained entry to that match by attacking Scotty 2 Hotty in the corridor. This somehow meant Test could simply take his place in the match. Wrestling logic. Test isn't punished and just randomly occasionally mentions over the year that he has immunity from being fired. So ultimately, him having such a big spot on Survivor Series was a complete waste of time. He had 2 matches for God's sake, he was like the main character. The Undertaker was upset with Vince McMahon because he felt disrespected. Taker had been in the WWF 11 years, yet Vince hadn't felt he could trust Taker with the secret that Kurt Angle was actually on their side of the war. Within a month, this would all lead to the Undertaker turning heel and becoming Big Evil with a haircut. Matt and Jeff Hardy had participated in a cage match at Survivor Series, which they lost when Jeff made the poor decision to dive off the cage when he could have just left and the Hardys would have won. This started an angle where Matt Hardy was resentful towards Jeff and his bad choices, and they would eventually have their first feud against each other. And Matt Hardy's Mattitude gimmick. Now you might be wondering at this point, what happened to the majority of the Alliance roster who were all fired in storyline? That would be a legit question which the Hawk won't punch you in the gut for asking. The first member of the former Alliance who was apparently fired we see is Lance Storm. He cuts a promo about biding his time and waiting to come back, but then it's revealed he's actually working as a janitor. He sneaks into the arena and begs for his job back, and he eventually wins his job back through winning a match against The Rock. Alright, it was by count out, but a win's a win. The second person is referee Nick Patrick. Vince brings him out to help assist him in a match. I'd like to see them explain how Nick Patrick is still having a job. A man who ruined so many matches during the Invasion storyline, he was pretty much hated. Next up to re-show his face is Booker T. He returns at the Vengeance pay-per-view interfering in the Undisputed title match and helps Chris Jericho capture the belts. He hangs out with Vince McMahon doing his bidding for a bit, so I guess he has his job back. He moves on into that famous feud with Stone Cold in a grocery store. It didn't go well for him. And this is how it goes really. The wrestlers who were all supposedly fired just started turning up over the next few months, and nobody thought to question it. So ultimately it was all pretty stupid because loads of the ex-Alliance guys became Vince McMahon's allies. The very men who were trying to destroy Vince McMahon's company became his friends. The men who betrayed him were now his friends. If I was Vince, I wouldn't want to help any of these guys out. It wasn't really until the first ever WWF draft in 2002 that we saw the missing Alliance wrestlers. They were still here. They'd always been here, wrestling on house shows, Jacked and Heat. Your Ravens, your Just Incredibles, your Tommy Dreamers, your Stevie Richards. We were told for months that the Survivor Series was the biggest event where a wrestling company would go out of business and everyone from one company was going to lose their livelihoods. So I bet you're wondering, did anybody from the Alliance side actually lose their jobs? And the answer to that is no, my little friends. Not a single one. Every single wrestler still signed would wrestle again for the WWE. And this was never explained. Wow, what a waste of time. It kind of makes the angle look even worse. Let the Hawk know what you thought of the Invasion angle. It's been known for a long time that this angle was underwhelming, but even the aftermath is underwhelming. Within 2 weeks, the Alliance was never mentioned again and they tried to move on as quickly as possible. And if you don't agree with that, it's not a loss at all.